Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Wealth After Work, the show designed to take you in and through your retirement. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio today are two members from ASC Financial Group. We have the president and founder, Ralph Grosso, and we have financial advisor, Taylor Munoz. We're so glad that you're here with us today. The title of today's show is Risk On or Risk Off. We're going to be diving deeply into this concept of risk tolerance and risk capacity. You're going to want to stay with us to find out what Ralph and Taylor have to say today. But first, gentlemen, so great to be back on set with you. How are you this week?
Oh, we're great. Great. Well, it's good to be with you too, Kristen.
Yes, well, we've gotten to have some conversations on set before, but Taylor, welcome to the set. It's really good to have you here as well.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Well, this concept of risk that we're going to be talking about today, the reality is that folks really need to pay attention to managing their risk appropriately, especially as you enter and approach your retirement. And there might be a difference between your risk tolerance and your risk capacity. What are we talking about here? Well, let's dive in and first ask the question. I'm curious, why is it so important for folks to pay attention to their capacity and their tolerance for risk, especially as they near retirement?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kristen. So we have to understand that our money goes through three phases. We've got accumulation. Typically during our working years, our focus is going to be on growth, and that would be the first phase. Then as we get closer to retirement, we shift into the second phase, which is preservation. We've accumulated this money. We now want to make sure this money is protected. And then finally, the third, and that's typically when we're retired, is going to be distribution, income. Along that way. And, when we do many educational events during the course of the year, and one of the questions that we ask when we do these events, Kristen, if I've got a 401k or any type of investment, I have a statement, it's just money on a piece of paper.
Right.
But the question is, what is the purpose of that money, right? And so what we'll do is show of hands, how many folks in the room today, the purpose of your retirement money is basically going to be used to pass on to the next generation, your loved ones. You don't really need it. And we'll get a couple of people raising their hands.
Okay.
The second question we ask is, okay, show of hands, how many folks in the room, the purpose of this money is basically for a large purchase, like a Winnebago or another home. And typically no one raises their hand.
Interesting. Okay.
But the third question is, the purpose of the money you've accumulated, is that purpose for income? Are you going to need income? And Kristen, all the hands go up. And so it's important to understand, as we get closer to retirement, we want to make sure that we are reducing risk, because that will affect our income.
And that's so important for folks to think about, because those losses, especially as you're entering and nearing retirement, you don't have time on your side like you do when you're younger. Yes, the stock market historically over time is always going up, but if it hits at the wrong time and you are depending on that money for your income, that could be really devastating for folks. So I'm curious, what are some of the key questions you ask when people come in to meet with you for the first time in order for you to appropriately gauge what their level of risk tolerance is?
Sure. Well, Kristen, there's one key question that we always ask folks, and I'm going to ask you the question that we would ask anyone that we sit down with.
Okay.
If you woke up tomorrow and the market had taken a dive, next downturn occurred, how much do you feel that you could afford to lose?
Ooh, that is a really good question. And I like that you say, not how much do you think,
Right.
How much you could feel. I'm going to ask you more about the wording of that in just a
Sure.
second.
Yeah.
But let me just say this. So, knowing where I am in my current stage of life, I know that I have time on my side because I'm still working. I'm in my mid 40s. So I wouldn't like it, right, if the market went down, but I know that I would have time to make that up. But let's fast forward. If I was 20 years older than I am now, I wouldn't want to see that loss at all because I know I would be depending on that money for income.
Yeah. Well, and as you know, we're working almost solely with those that are in or approaching retirement.
Yes.
And so, we have some folks that have the same answer you have, but a lot come in and say, well, I don't really want to lose anything.
Sure.
Right?
That makes sense.
They've worked hard during their accumulation years to save up those retirement savings, to build their nest egg. And when they're accumulating, there's not a whole lot of strategy that goes into it, right? Especially if you have a time horizon where you can recover from loss,
right.
you are continuing to contribute to your retirement accounts. But once you hit that preservation phase and ultimately you need to take distributions and live on that income, that's the point at which you need to now start taking into account much more what risk tolerance do you have and how do you feel about that? Because we start off with a feelings question, as you had kind of indicated.
Yeah, and I want to highlight that because that's an important distinction.
Well, what we often find is that there's a disparity between how one feels about loss and the way that they're actually positioned within their retirement portfolios. So it's important to have that introspective conversation on the front end about, well, if the market took a dive, how would you feel? One example that we point to is back in 2011. So there's an area in Florida, Palm Beach, Florida, called Worth Avenue.
Worth Avenue.
Worth Avenue. This is an area it's always been known for being an area where the wealthy people shop. Right? And in 2011, when the news came out that Bernie Madoff had scammed all of those people cumulatively out of billions and billions of dollars, Worth Avenue was a ghost town. Nobody was shopping. Now, these are folks that were worth millions or tens of millions. They may have lost millions, but they still had tens of millions.
Yes.
But even they felt like they could not afford to be able to go and spend and shop.
Right.
So so it's not always about the reality of how we're positioned or what we can afford to lose. It's how we feel if that loss occurs. So we're really trying to help folks marry their risk tolerance with how they feel with how they're positioned.
That is so wise to do. And I bet too, when you put a monetary amount to it, that can change the conversation. Because I think our industry often talks about percentages and, oh, if you were to lose 20%, how would you feel? Well, that's different than saying if you were to lose $500,000, how would you feel, right?
Exactly. And so, Kristen, we do what's called our retirement income analysis. And it's basically going to take a look at, from a risk point of view, like the major drawdown that we had, the major crash, and that was back in 2008. And what the retirement income analysis will show us is if that happens again, or when that happens again, right? Because if it happened before, it's going to more than likely happen again. What's the percentage that you're going to lose? And someone might say, as you pointed out, well, I can take 20%. But if that 20% is 200,000, totally different situation.
Right.
We had a gentleman come in to see us. Now I'm going to bring you back, Kristen, to 1999.
Okay.
Right. I was just a pup there doing this, but back in 1999, this gentleman came in to see me. And he was an executive with Lucent Technology. And all of his retirement money was in Lucent stock. And at the time, Lucent was trading about $80 a share.
Okay.
And so we did the retirement income analysis. We put a plan together for him and showing him how to reduce risk, how to maximize income. Said, Ralph, I love the plan. It's awesome. But I know this stock is going to go to $20 a share. When it does, that's when I'm going to pull the trigger. Well, if you remember back in 1999, that's when we had the tech bubble.
Yes.
Right? That $80 a share went to $3. That gentleman could not retire.
Wow. Yeah.
And so the takeaway from that is that it's never too soon to look at your risk situation. And so if that's you and you would like to know, what are my options? How can I reduce risk? How can I maximize income? I want to encourage you right now to pick up the phone, give us a call at the number you see on the screen, And so that we can begin a process of putting together something that will give you stress-free retirement, that will give you an analysis of where you are and where you could be.
So beautifully said. Great questions to think about. Ralph Taylor, thank you. I'm excited to continue the conversation with you. That number to call to claim your complimentary retirement income analysis is there for you on the bottom of your screen. Simply dial 844-918-4867. Or if you'd like to connect online, we've got you covered. If you simply pull out your smartphone, you can open up the camera app. Just point, click, and scan that QR code that you see there down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from ASC Financial Group will reach out to connect with you to schedule your complimentary retirement income analysis that way as well. Don't go anywhere. We've got a lot more to get into today. Some important questions for you to be thinking about regarding risk and your retirement right after this.
So my passion stems from my parents. So when my dad retired in the early 90s, he didn't have a lot of money accumulated, but he had a house. My dad was conservative. He never was a risk taker. So he placed his money in the bank in CDs, and he lived off the interest along with a small pension and his Social Security and my mom's Social Security. And I went and visited them back in '99. And when the CDs began to mature, we realized that the renewal rates were much lower. I said, okay, let me take a look at your accounts. What I found was my dad at the time was 72. He had the portfolio of a 41-year-old. You know, very high risk, aggressive growth. And so I did a retirement income analysis, and we put them into a plan that gave them a predictable, guaranteed income every month. My dad lived to 92, my mom lived to 89, and they had a really, really stress-free retirement because of that guaranteed income. And so I'm passionate that I want to do that same job, that same strategy for the clients that I work with today.
Welcome back to Wealth After Work. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, here with two members from ASC Financial Group. Ralph and Taylor are joining me today for this very important conversation all about risk. And we're titling the show Risk On, Risk Off. As you guys so eloquently stated already in the show, so many factors come into play when building the right comprehensive financial plan for someone's risk tolerance, their risk capacity, even more important, their investment styles, their investment goals for that money. So I'm curious, earlier we talked about what happens when someone loses a large sum of money right when they're planning to retire, and that story that you shared earlier, Ralph. So could you dig a little deeper, Taylor, into what is so devastating about the timing of when these losses might occur?
Yeah, well, Kristen, what we're trying to guard against is a situation where someone experiences substantial losses in the early years of their retirement, right? And ultimately what we're talking about is something called sequence of return risk. And essentially what that is, it's the timing of poor investment returns and how that can impact the longevity of our money, right? So early losses in one's retirement years can impact how long their savings and their income during retirement can last. So we often point to an example where if you retired in the year 2000 and you had a retirement portfolio worth $1 million, and you follow what we call the Wall Street 4% rule, that idea that you can, in theory, pull 4% out of your portfolio each year and then account for some inflation each year, how long would that $1 million portfolio last?
Right, because the theory is that if you follow this rule of thumb, the 4% rule, you should be able to do that and not outlive your money, right?
Correct. Yeah, correct, in theory, right? And so we have some other thoughts on that too.
Right.
But ultimately, what the analysis shows is that your money would have run out in 2017.
Wow.
Right? Because if you retired in the year 2000, you immediately had 3 years of loss. The tech bubble burst, 9/11, 2000, 2001, 2002. Right?
Yep.
And so those 3 years of loss substantially affect how long your retirement savings last, right? So that's where, when we try to position folks in such a way that we're not taking those losses early on in retirement, so that they don't outlive their retirement savings. And for those that are viewing from home, do we know where the market's going to go in the next few years? No. But what we do know is that the next 3 years of market returns could dictate the next 30 years of your retirement picture. So that's what we're trying to, to help folks understand and see through when we meet with them.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up, because I think what the challenge is we know the market only does one of two things, right? It goes up, it goes down.
Yeah.
We do, to your point, don't know when it's going to go down, and we have no control over the timing of that. And if it hits right when you're planning to retire, that can be so devastating, and you can never recover from that. So what are some other questions that you ask to really help assess, okay, how someone needs to be positioned, or if you will, make the shift with their investment allocation to guard against something like sequence of returns risk?
Yeah, so we know, Kristen, that back in 2008, across the line, most people lost somewhere between 40 and 60% of their money, okay? And to your point before, if you have the time, you can make it back up.
Right.
But as you're getting closer to retirement, we don't have the time. And the question we want to ask is, do you think that what happened in 08 can happen again? And if you think it can happen again, what are you doing now to protect and preserve your assets? And so the retirement income analysis is going to be a great tool for you to take a look at how I can reduce risk and maximize income. And the other thing we need to take a look at is, are you having these type of conversations with your current advisor? Are you talking about the risk you're taking, or is it all growth? And again, as we enter into retirement, we need to be more conscious of being more risk adverse. We're now entering that preservation phase, 5 to 10 years out, where we now need to start to take a look at how do we protect what we've worked so hard to accumulate.
Ralph, as you were speaking, it just made me think of the reality that at a certain point, the chasing after those huge gains doesn't help you as much as that large loss could absolutely decimate your retirement savings. And so that's what you're talking about, is really helping folks successfully make this transition from that accumulation phase of your life, which most folks are familiar with. And quite frankly, most of the financial services industry is based on the accumulation phase. But I want to go back to the different stages of retirement that you talked about. Let's really break it down for folks. So, of course, the accumulation phase, we've touched on that, but let's dive deeply into then the transition that happens from there.
Sure, yeah, and I think Ralph really spoke to the phases that lead up to retirement. And then once you're in retirement, we go through three more phases that we often reference. It's your go-go years, your slow-go years, and your no-go years, right? And as we've spoken before, we primarily work with folks that are in or approaching retirement. They're in that what we call that retirement red zone, that 5 to 10 years out from retirement that folks are beginning to really start to plan for this. But your go-go years are roughly, we say 10 to 15 years where you're at your healthiest, you're in retirement, you're planning all those things that you didn't get to do while you were working.
All those bucket list items,
right? You're going on vacation, you're spending more time with family, all the things that you dreamed about doing in retirement. That's your go-go years. Then from your go-go years, you transition into your slow-go years. And that may be another 10 years or so for most folks. And it's exactly how it sounds. It's the time at which you start to slow down, that you might not be able to do everything that you used to do. You just have to take a different pace. You might start to have some health issues that you need to address, but that's our slow-go years. And then we go into our no-go years. The no-go years, that's the final phase of our retirement. We don't necessarily know how long that's going to be, but that's the point at which we just can't do what we used to do. And so when we help folks think through this, there's a couple key takeaways that we want them to understand. One is that we want to try to front load those go-go years as much as possible with the income they need to accomplish all the dreams that they wanted to do in retirement. We want to maximize income and we want to reduce risk. We don't want to take large losses in those initial years. We want to preserve our principal for later in life if we need that for healthcare costs, long-term care costs, you name it. The other thing is that, again, we can't take those significant losses in retirement. If we're aggressively invested in retirement, there's also the potential for some significant loss. And if we experience significant loss in those early years, we only really have three choices to make, right? We can spend less, we can go back to work, or we can choose to spend our principal and spend down that, that nest egg and hope that there's enough growth to make up the difference. And, and for those listening, I just ask, are any of those three options, acceptable in retirement? Most people don't want to go back to work. You don't want to spend less, and you don't want to have to curtail the plans that you had when you were planning for those retirement years. So if that's you and you don't know exactly how much risk you're taking, you don't know what kind of risk you have in your portfolio, and you feel that maybe now's the time to take some of that risk off the table, we encourage you to pick up the phone, give us a call, scan the QR code on the screen so that we can take you through our retirement income analysis and do a risk testing with you as well, so that we can make you in control of your risk and not allow the risk to control you.
Taylor, thank you so much. Ralph, thank you. Again, you don't have to go this alone. The team of ASC Financial Group would love to be able to help you navigate through all these things, all these decisions, and these questions that we know that you are now asking yourselves as well. You don't have to go it alone. That number to call to claim your complimentary retirement income analysis is 844-918-4867. Or again, you're welcome to scan that QR code and that will get you connected as well. We'll be back with more right after this.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to Wealth After Work. I'm Kristen Oakley here with both Ralph and Taylor from ASC Financial Group, and a very important conversation we've been having today based on the concept of risk. And I know that you all are passionate not only about helping folks minimize risk in their retirements, but you also love helping people maximize their income. So let's talk about that. How do you accomplish that goal with your clients?
So the first thing we want to take a look at is their budget. Okay, what are their fixed expenses? What are their needs from month to month? Remember now you're in retirement, so it's all about income to meet your needs, right? And so that could be done through Social Security. If you're blessed to have a pension, we can do that way. If there's a shortage, we've got to make sure we can fill that with our invested assets. However, once we get that accomplished, we know our fixed expenses, now we can begin to dream a little bit. We can begin to take a look at, what were the things I didn't do when I was working that I'd like to do now? What would my ideal retirement look like? And so then we take it from there to begin to dream and look at how can we maximize our income to achieve those goals.
And I love that you help people dream again. I think so many folks get sucked into their working lives. It's what they know, their schedule, it's all kind of planned out for them. It's really important to ask, okay, what's next, right? And what are you retiring to, right? Having something to look forward to as well.
Right.
Well, I know you're offering this complimentary retirement income analysis to our viewers today. I'd love for you to break down in a little more detail what all goes into that and what our viewers can expect when they connect with you to receive it.
Sure. Yeah, so we do this retirement income analysis, and really what it is, it's a simplification of their retirement picture. It puts everything in an easy-to-read format, condensed onto one page, right? And we look at 4 key areas when we do our retirement income analysis.
Okay.
The first area we look at is risk, right? And we talked a lot in this episode about risk. But how much risk are you taking? What is your exposure in the market? If when the next downturn happens, how much could you stand to potentially lose, right? The second area that we look at are the tax implications of your money. We believe when you have a government that is trillions and trillions of dollars in debt and counting, there's certainly a very good possibility that the tax rates are going to increase in the future in order to try to spend down that debt.
Right, right.
And so what is the impact when you're now in the distribution phase of your life and you need to rely on those assets and you're pulling money out? What's the effect of taxes on your retirement, on your retirement picture? So we look at the tax implications. Then we look at what are the fees that you might be paying in your current portfolio, and are you maximizing income? So those are the four key areas that we look at, and we really look to draw that out for folks to be able to see that summary on one page. And so that's where we encourage individuals to reach out to us. We would sit down and review that retirement income analysis with them. We have a woman from Bethlehem that came in recently, and she became a client. And when she came in, we asked her some of those very same risk questions that we asked you early on.
Yes.
Was, how much do you feel you could afford to lose if the market were to take a dive tomorrow?
Right.
She said, well, I wouldn't want to lose more than 10%. Okay. So we did the retirement income analysis. We used Morningstar, which is an independent, analysis of your exact holdings. And when she came to us and we looked at how she was positioned in her retirement portfolio, it showed that if the 2008 crisis were to happen again, and she was positioned as she was when she came to us, she would suffer 47% loss in her portfolio.
Wow.
And the real kicker was that the advisor she had previously told her she wasn't taking enough risk and she wasn't positioned for enough growth, right? So we have an individual that said, I don't want to lose more than 10%, but she could have lost 47. And
wow, what a discrepancy.
Yeah, and that's where, again, we talk about we need to align individuals' risk tolerances and expectations with their actual positioning in the income strategies that we put them in, right?
I'm curious, does that happen a lot when folks come in for this retirement income analysis and they're shocked to find out that what they thought how much risk they were taking was actually not the reality?
Yeah, Kristen, it's an eye-opener for many people once they see that their feelings does not match their behavior, right?
Yeah, and so so she came to you, that was the reality, you were able to expose that discrepancy, and what happened from there?
Well, she became a client, and we were able to put her in income strategies that brought her risk, her risk down and maximized her income. And that's what we do every day for folks. And so, really at this point, if you're in the same boat as our client was, and you have a low tolerance for risk, you don't want to lose anything, but you don't know how your retirement assets are positioned, that's where we invite you to come in, sit down with us for this complimentary, no obligation retirement income analysis, and we'll be able to put the same financial picture on a page for you. And it's a valuable tool for you to use to make decisions as you head towards retirement.
Well, Taylor and Ralph, thank you so much. I'm excited for more folks to get to connect with you as a result of today's show. 844-918-4867 is the number to call. Thanks so much for being here. Be safe, be happy, be blessed, and we look forward to being back with you next time here on Wealth After Work.